Well, for weeks now on Locked On Eagles, we've been talking about the Eagles' areas of need at certain positions, but it looks like down at the Senior Bowl, word is they are focused yet again on the trenches.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, Eagles fans. I'm Louis DiBiase, co-host of the Locked On Eagles podcast, Eagles analyst. Also over at Bleacher Report, he's Gino Camilleri, scouting director, Eagles analyst at Bleacher Report, and my co-host. On today's edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast, we discuss how the Eagles might be continuing what I think is their overkill commitment to the trenches this draft season, why this class should include a running back for the first time since 2021, and get into winners and losers from the final day of practice at the Senior Bowl in Mobile, Alabama. We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster, so post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. So, Gino, as I mentioned, word has been around the Senior Bowl that the Eagles are, this was the report, and I've kind of heard the same thing talking to some people. The Eagles are highly likely to take an offensive tackle early in the draft, that they've been keeping a close eye on prospects down in Mobile. And look, of the trench positions that they could take in the draft this year, I think the one they would need the most, and you'd probably agree, right, is tackle, because Tyler Steen, depending on what happens with Jason Kelce, might be your new starting right guard. If Cam Jurgens has to move over to center, you don't have that premier tackle backup anymore. Lane Johnson's not going to play forever, and you do have 4 picks in the first 3 rounds, but I don't know, man. It still kind of gets me a little annoyed hearing that. If they pass up a premier day one prospect at one of these other positions, I think that they finally need to invest in for a lineman. I don't know. I'm kind of hell-bent and a little bit stubborn this year on this topic.
The good thing is that free agency does come before the draft, so
For
hopefully
sure.
we can make Lou a little bit happier before
Yeah, Patrick
we get to
Surtain
that
would
part
make
of the
me
season.
shut up. Absolutely.
Oh, for sure. But at the same time, Lou, I think it is warranted, because if you look at the strengths of this class, I mean, you're down in Mobile, Alabama. If anybody has watched the practices on TV, it is the offensive line class. It is the defensive linemen. These dudes just get bigger and bigger every single year. They get more athletic. And I think offensive tackle, Lane Johnson, these guys are not a dime a dozen, and for a reason. When you find an elite one, you have to hang on to them. So I see why they like to be proactive, and hopefully it isn't the approach where Lane plays for 6 more years and you take 2 more picks to try and replace him.
Yes.
That's not the way to go about it. But if there have been discussions in NovaCare that Lane truly might not be around forever and it might be 1 or 2 more years, I think you get ahead of the ball and you go up there and get that guy, because like you said, Lou, you have 3 picks in the top 53. If you go out and get that trench pick, well, we could have some fun in the second round. Then you can get into, okay, let's shore up the secondary. Let's go get those linebackers, because if it came down to it at the end of the day, if it's an offensive tackle or a high safety or a high cornerback, we know where Howie Roseman is going to put his cards at the end of the day.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, Gino, I like that the Eagles are proactive at these very important positions, and that's why I believe this report. They also met with, by the way, Oklahoma tackle Tyler Guyton, who has connections with Lane Johnson. So they met with him down this week. I totally believe it. As you mentioned, they were preparing for Jason Kelce's retirement for years. They spent a second-round pick on Landon Dickerson to replace him. Then they spent a second-round pick on Cam Jurgens to replace him. Look at when Jason Peters was the left tackle. They took Andre Dillard in preparation. So they like to be very proactive at these positions on the offensive and defensive line. But like you said, I hope they know the timetable for Lane, because the last thing I want to do is continuously spend picks at this spot and Lane plays another 3-4 years. And then sure, you might still have his replacement in this guy that you took, but it's like, we could have took that guy in 3 to 4 years and addressed these other positions.
Because if you're making that argument of taking him that early, the Andre Dillard thing was a little bit weird, because usually those guys come in and they start right away. If you're a first round offensive lineman, you're projected to start no matter what. If you're an interior guy, if you're a tackle.
And you should want that, right, Gino?
100%. And those guys, I think, in my opinion, this is just my opinion. I think it's the easiest for these top level guys to come in and kind of plug and play, and you're going to get top level play from these. I mean, you look around,
That's
like look at Tristan Wirf's class, how many good guys there were. There's like Darisaw in that class, and all those guys came in right away, and they were
right. They
really,
don't need 4
really
years
good.
to develop.
No, they don't need to sit. It might hinder them to sit around for 3 to 4 years, rather, to where they're not getting snaps, they're not keeping up with,
and you don't take advantage of that rookie contract.
Oh yeah, that's the one thing we have to get to, Lou, is getting out of this cycle of wasting years of rookie contracts on guys. And that was what I think kind of killed Howie in that 2018 to 2020 period, was this red shirt idea. Like Jalen Reagor, I think they took with the red shirt idea in the back of their mind, that they're going to get this guy and he's going to come in and train and in 2 years he'll be great. Well, no, I mean, on the offensive line, you might not have that. You might have to be taken and plug and play and be the guy to take Jason Kelce's position. And they don't want to be in that position. So I see the proactive nature, but at the same time, you better be very, very aggressive in free agency to plug in those other areas if that is going to be the way that you go about it. But at the same time, I like the approach because it is really tough to acquire very good young offensive line talent otherwise this day and age without having to pay. Dude, what was Laramie Tunsil? It was like 75 first-round picks to go and get that guy.
And that's the thing, Gino, is you don't always force an area of short-term need, right? But at the same time, like we're talking about, you don't force a pick, and we've had this conversation a lot throughout the years on the show about this. You don't also force a need either that could be long down the road, and you don't force a pick just because it's a certain position. And so that's at least the way that I see it. Again, I understand the need and the importance of this position, and the Eagles do have capital this year where they can have their cake and eat it too. They have a first-round pick, they have 2 second-rounders, they have a third, but I hear that report, and yet again, I'm like, is Howie Roseman learning any sorts of lessons? And again, it's assuming a lot just based on one small rumor that we've heard. And as you mentioned, free agency, we have a long way to go with that still, and the draft isn't until April. It's a couple months away, but just hearing that report's already starting to trigger that impatience that I'm having.
There was one other report I saw too that it was like the Eagles are dead set on picking a defensive tackle in this year's draft, and it's like the draft is 2.5 months away. Literally, the Jalen Carter selection happened the day of, if I'm not mistaken, because his agent called Howie Roseman and the executives and pitched Jalen Carter the last minute to kind of get them to take him, and they ended up doing that. So things will change all of the time, but one thing that does remain the same is the Eagles' ability and want to go and continue to have, I would say, the best offensive line in football, and they have to get back to that, Lou. And I don't think Howie Roseman and the guys in the building were happy with what played out last year. So if this is a kind of put the pressure to the fire a little bit pick, I see where they might be going with that, to like, oh, there are guys here that might come and take our job, even though Lane Johnson isn't going anywhere. I like the approach of potentially getting the best of a group that has Tyler Guyton sitting around there and at this 22nd pick. Like, that wouldn't be all too bad. In other classes, he's probably a top 10 selection. And it's going to be one class where I think that the first day is just going to be so heavy with trenches, and then the skill guys are going to get selected, because I don't think there's those top of the top cornerbacks, top of the top safeties. It is very trench heavy this year for sure, but at the same time, that's not a bad thing, because the Eagles, they don't shy away from taking them. Even though you might not like it, Lou, it is one thing that it is a good investment, because you have to take care of your quarterback.
And I've said that before, that I know the main philosophy and strategy of this team should be trench heavy, especially in a class that has a lot of those prospects. And I'm not even saying I'm going to be upset if they take a lineman with one of those first 4 picks. I'm not naive. I know it's not going to go linebacker, then safety, then cornerback, then running back. Like, that's just not what the Eagles. They're not going to have a Detroit Lions 2023 type of class where they go running back, linebacker, then safety, and then tight end. That's just not going to happen. I'm just hoping this doesn't lead to yet another draft where it's tackle, then center to replace Jason Kelce yet again, and then it's wide receiver. And, they just don't ever try for those other positions. But we know that we've talked about that on the show before. Just thought that report was interesting, and they're definitely doing their due diligence on the trenches down in Mobile. Another class, or I should say position, Gino, that I hope they're doing their due diligence on is the running back position. I think this draft class does need to include a running back regardless of what happens in free agency. We'll get into why coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. At the start of the new year, every small business owner is asking themselves the same question. What's the one move I can make that'll take my business to the next level in 2024? LinkedIn Jobs knows that your success all depends on the team you're surrounding yourself with. That's why LinkedIn Jobs has created the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. They have a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn also knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats, and they might not have the time or the resources to hire. So thankfully with LinkedIn, the process is intuitive, quick, and easy. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply.
This episode of LOE is also brought to you by our friends over at DoorDash. The big game is coming up, and I know you're going to have people over, and let's just say you run out of burgers. Let's just say you run out of chips. You need something at your door real quick. Well, guess what? DoorDash can help you out. If you got to order pizza, wings, whatever, DoorDash can help you right now. All you got to do, take your phone, download the DoorDash app, and we are going to get you a 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order. Download that DoorDash app and enter the code LOCKED23. That's LOCKED23 to get 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order. You're going to have people over for the big game. You want to get chips, dips, nachos, everything you need. Heck, you can even get plates and cups delivered right to your home. Go to DoorDash, 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more by using code LOCKED23. We thank DoorDash for being a presenting sponsor of the Locked On Eagles podcast.
We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Guys, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. So go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. So, Gino, down here in Mobile for the Senior Bowl, I've been watching actually some different positions. Like, I'm not just watching corners, linebackers, and safeties, despite my Twitter account so far the last few days. But I actually think
let me ask you this real quick. Do you enjoy one-on-ones of linebackers and running backs? Because I despise it. I think it's the dumbest drill of all time.
I love that you actually brought it up. I even mentioned to a good friend of ours today during practice that I hate it. It's so unfair to the linebackers that there's like 7 yards of cushion and the running backs are running the same flat route over and over, and it's making some of these prospects look bad. Look, I could watch corner and wide receiver one-on-ones all day long. I should have went to the other side of the field and watched trenches more than I did. If I'm being honest, the fan in me took over because I love it. But I totally agree. Linebacker, running back one-on-ones, do not evaluate a linebacker based on that drill.
But it makes you pop your eyes up when you see a running back. Just put a dude in a blender because it's so unfair, man.
I will say that.
I'm with you that running back, I think maybe taking the Band-Aid approach, it might be done with those days, honestly. Like, get back to the well of taking these guys. And I liked the Miles pick. I thought it was a little bit too rich for a running back. Like,
agreed.
Day 3, man, I think you're going to find an abundance of guys that are going to be available. I mean, heck, dude, look at Dylan Lauba out of New Hampshire. He's down in Mobile, absolutely destroying it. Has put up over 20 miles per hour on the GPS. You talk about these running backs in this class. These guys are versatile, man. They are do-it-all, can help you out in the pass game as well as the run game. And for Kellen Moore, I'm going to be intrigued to see how he implements these guys because he does a lot of things in the backfield, moving pieces around. How does he like his backs? Does he like a true bell cow, just get the ball, go downhill, or does he like somebody who has that do-it-all element to him?
Yeah. And I think the Eagles could use a little bit of both. I'm not the we need a big power running back kind of guy, like bring back LeGarrette Blount and Jay Ajayi, but I do kind of like that style of player to have some sort of element back in this backfield. Rashad Penny could not be that guy in 2023, and that's never Swift style or Gainwell style. So I think they need that, and they need a more consistent pass catcher. Even DeAndre Swift this year I thought was going to be better in that area because of all the summer hype, and that really didn't come to fruition. So I like a lot of the prospects. You mentioned the New Hampshire kid. You also look at Kentucky running back Ray Davis has just caught everything this weekend. Marshawn Lloyd from USC, his route running has been outstanding, and those guys are physical running backs. So, yeah, Gino, look, regardless of what happens, and I'm curious what Howie does in free agency with DeAndre Swift, an unrestricted free agent. Does he try to bring him back on a team-friendly one-year deal, or does he go more for like a Devin Singletary type or A.J. Dillon? Does he try to make another Swift type of trade for a 2025 free agent like, I don't know, Joe Mixon or James Conner, something like that? Just seems like Howie's mentality. But even if they do that, even if they go about one of those other routes in free agency, I think this team overall just needs a better committee. I think it's time to refresh the RB2 and RB3 spot. I don't want it to be Gainwell and Scott anymore.
The thing with making that pick on day 3 is that you might get that boomer bust aspect of it where you got a really good Kenny G in year 1 and a poor Kenny G in year 2. But the thing about that is it wasn't a high investment, so we go out and we do it again, right? And I'm with you there. I don't think you sit on your hands this day and age at the running back position where there's so many guys, Lou. And
just
you
take
talk
a shot.
about,
I mean, every
you talk
year
about
a
at the
day 2
Senior
or day 3
Bowl
guy becomes a star, right?
I'm not sure all those guys go day 2 that are down there in Mobile right now, man. You might get one of those guys early day 3 that you could say, oh, we could trade up early day 3, get a Marshawn Lloyd who is a local kid who is from Delaware, is a local guy like DeAndre Swift. Howie Roseman loves those type of stories. So I absolutely love that idea. And the thing about running back, Lou, is I look at it, these guys got a shelf life, right? As soon as you open the package, it starts to depreciate.
Right.
Get the young guys and just burn their legs into the ground. I'm so with you that it's like, let's just bring in 2 to 3 guys each year, a young crop of new, younger guys that we could put behind a DeAndre Swift on a 1 or 2 year deal. Or I don't want to say Kenny Gainwell, but like the Devin Singletary idea I like, and the A.J. Dillon approach. These guys are a dime a dozen. You don't have to pay them anything. And you gave up 2 picks for DeAndre Swift last year. You could use both of those hypothetically on a running back in that class, and we could be having a different discussion saying how you lucked into getting one of these guys who, to look at the NFL last year, how many back end of the draft running backs
it's every year
just dominated, absolutely dominated.
As you mentioned, it could be very boom or bust. You might end up in 2000 and what was it, 2016, where you get a Wendell Smallwood and it doesn't pan out, right? Or
Adams.
2017, Donnell Pumphrey. But the vast majority of the time, those running backs become somewhat productive to a certain floor. Even Kenneth Gainwell. Like Kenneth Gainwell for a 5th-round pick has been a pretty good selection. Like it's a very high floor position that you could take. So you might as well take a crack at one of the, unless you're going to go out there, and I can't see the Eagles do this, unless you're going to go out there and hand Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, or Josh Jacobs a big deal. Even if you bring in a DeAndre Swift, or let's say Kellen Moore wants Tony Pollard back, I just doubt that would happen, but let's say that's the scenario. Even if that's the case, unless they bring in one of those top 3 free agents, you want your backups, your RB2 and RB3, to be better than the Gainwell-Scott combination. Because even DeAndre Swift, I don't know. I mean, he was good this year. He had 1,000 yards, but do I want him to be your bell cow, every single down type of player? I'm not so sure. And I felt like this year he needed to be, because I didn't really want Gainwell and Scott on the field. So you might as well take a shot. And this team, correct me if I'm wrong, but outside of Gainwell, I don't think they've drafted a running back since Sanders in 2019. Like Kennedy Brooks wasn't. He was a unrestricted free agent.
Street, so was Trace Sermon.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. And then
so it's been Gainwell in 4 draft classes.
I mean, even before that, they weren't really even drafting guys. I mean, they drafted Donnell Pumphrey, but they brought in Corey Clement off the street. They brought
Wendell
in Josh
Smallwood
Adams off the
Wendell
street.
Smallwood was a 5th-round pick, I believe.
Yeah, they really don't invest high like they did with Miles that one time. That was a out of the ordinary type of approach where he didn't have many miles on his tires.
And they're in a contending window at the time too, so it was a different approach.
You could kind of take that with him, but now it's like we got to get guys in here who we know can be an effective piece to move the football, because we were talking about the investment of protecting your quarterback. That's a big piece of it, man. I mean, look at how much of a downfall it was when you just had to let Jalen sit back there and chuck that ball because you couldn't rely on the run game from 22 to 23. And at the same time, they need to find a way to get one of these pass-catching running backs that can be a true threat. And hopefully Kellen Moore can implement that into the offense. He loves to get guys open and scheme them open. You need that. It is a chessboard out there. And the Eagles, they were playing with a couple guys off of that chessboard because they didn't utilize all of the facets on offense that they had. And running back, we saw how great it was in the years of Brian Westbrook, and Shady McCoy comes in, and this guy is your offense. And heck, even I think you and I love the young Miles Sanders so much, and we're just trying to chase that high of what we had that 2019 season.
Yeah, that second half of the year, Miles Sanders in 2019. And I'm not suddenly becoming 2019 Lou DiBiase again in the show where I'm saying draft a running back in the first round, become this run-first offense. No, I'm just saying this team needs to take another shot on a day 3 pick. I'm not even saying a second or third rounder, but in the 4th or 5th round, can we take one of these prospects? Because as you mentioned, every single year you're getting players late in the draft or unrestricted, a dime a dozen, that become productive. And I think Philadelphia just hasn't really tried to get back into that market since they've had the Sanders and Swift era in Philadelphia. So overall, though, the running backs have looked really good in the Senior Bowl this week. Who else has shined? Who has struggled? We'll get into that as we recap day 3, the final day of practice, coming up next. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by Prize Picks Daily Fantasy, which you can win 25 times your money this football season with the big game coming up. All you got to do is select 2 or more players, pick more or less than their projected stats, and place your entry. And if you're a basketball fan, the basketball season's here. You can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League. It's a league created specifically for combo projections that includes 2 or more players from different sports and leagues. For example, you could take, let's say, although they're struggling, the Los Angeles Lakers, LeBron James, maybe he goes in revenge mode, and you take Travis Kelce in the big game at a 10.5 combo of 3 points made and receptions. You can do that. If you want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill, comedian Andrew Schulz, you can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries from some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each and every week. Prize Picks, they continue to change the game. Not done. They even offer a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. So for football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. So go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use our code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Once again, that's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL, code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks is daily fantasy sports made easy. All right, Gino, we're wrapping up this Thursday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. Continuing out with the Senior Bowl, today was the final day of practice, day off, then the game on Saturday as the NFL offseason is in full swing. The Pro Bowl's going on today. Jalen Hurts with the throwing competition. Jason Kelce's down there. The Pro Bowl is completely different now, but we've got the Pro Bowl, the East-West Shrine game. You had the CGS All-Star game not that long ago, the Senior Bowl now this week. It's in full effect, and I thought today there were some winners and losers at the Senior Bowl. We mentioned already 2 guys, Marshawn Lloyd from USC, Ray Davis from Kentucky. These running backs, it's been a pretty strong class, and that's what got me thinking that maybe this is the year the Eagles should take one of these backs on day 2 or day 3. But I also think in the secondary, your boy from Oregon, Kyrie Jackson, he showed off today in one-on-ones. Like, you mentioned his name a lot in the show, and I never really looked into him. And now you see him on the field, 6'3", good speed, can high point the football, aggressive. He's a trash talker. He's becoming a guy, and you texted me, I think that today, he's going to become a Mock Draft Monday favorite, and I'm starting to think so.
I talked a lot about these Oregon guys, and I think a lot of people are seeing them down in Mobile, how good they truly are. And
It's
I have a
good
theory.
Class for the Ducks, man. I agree.
I have a theory that scouts don't turn on Pac-12 games. Like they just find out about these guys at All-Star games, and then all of a sudden they're like,
I know
"Oh yeah,
Eagles
that
fans
guy's
don't
pretty
after
good."
2017.
Kyrie Jackson is an absolute dog, and so is a guy who you probably haven't heard about him because he played football at Toledo. Kenyon Mitchell. This guy,
Won a lot of money
defensive
this week.
back, made a whole bunch of money. I would say he's a surefire cornerback, and I think going forward, Lou, like we do like a prospect a day type thing, help people build their board out. I think that'd
I'm
be
down for
cool.
that.
Get guys like Kenyon Mitchell out there, and heck, even on the defensive side of the ball, you got guys at safety too, like Evan Williams had an Oregon helmet on out there, Lou. I'm sure you saw him, and
He had a good day.
Cedric Gray in the linebacker position out of the University of North Carolina. Even though we don't like that linebacker drill, he showed up at times where
He was definitely the best of the bunch in one-on-ones. Yeah.
the thing with these events that I'm lucky that I get to go down to CGS, and I'm like, you see these guys on the field at the Senior Bowl where they're eye level. I'm there for CGS, and it's cool to see the body types and see these guys move in space, and you really get a cool understanding when you're on the sideline. It's like, oh, these guys are huge. Like they're just a different level of huge, and they're a different level of athletic, and that's why I love I wish you watched the D-line, O-line one-on-ones more, because those guys, I think the biggest winner of the week is Jackson Powers Johnson, who isn't even a senior, went down to the Senior Bowl as a guard / center from Oregon, and hasn't lost a rep.
I caught a lot of him. Yeah, I think the Eagles, that's a guy they would love. Yeah.
I'm scared he goes to a team like Dallas, and you have to deal with him for the next 10 years. And one position I think that they are watching a lot is that wide receiver position, Lou. And out of all of them, with what the Eagles need and how strong it was down in Mobile, I think that slot third receiver, somebody who can wiggle, get in and out of their routes. You got Ladd McConkey down there. You got Luke McCaffrey. You got Ricky Purcell.
McCaffrey probably made the best catch of the day, actually.
Oh, they must have not shown. Was that the one where the
Penix rolled to his left? It was in the back of the end zone. Great body control. Gino, there's a lot of good slot receivers down here for sure.
And I've kind of been saying last year when we were talking at the deadline, like with Hunter Renfrow influence them, because what do the Eagles have that was like their top two guys in Quez Watkins and Olamide Zaccheaus? Like they were all kind of the same type of guy to an extent, where like, what was Quez doing different than these other guys? Ran the same routes, just at a lot poorer rate for you. I mean, if you get a freaking Ladd McConkey who had 1 billion catches at Georgia and can just be in the slot for you and be a weapon that could, you're going to need a Keenan Allen role in this offense, Lou. You see all these people on Twitter tweeting out like all of the route charts of what Keenan Allen ran for the Chargers last year. You're going to need somebody to do that. Even a
later round pick, Gino, like Tulane Jaquan Jackson, who actually said he's been with the Eagles multiple times.
Great couple days, actually.
He was a guy I didn't even know who he was. And then I came down here and suddenly he was on the radar. He was one of the most consistent receivers, or even somebody I really like. He's been dealing with some drop issues, but Jamari Thrash from Louisville creates separation. It just feels like every single play. He caught an insane back shoulder fade in the end zone today, draped in coverage. He had another extended touchdown in the back of the end zone. Like, if that's what you want, and there's a lot of different types of receivers. Jerry Rice's kid, Brendan Rice from USC.
Rice, yep.
If you want the more physical type, he's been pretty good the last 2 days. Is there, you know what, it's funny because you put me on Kyrie Jackson. You know, everybody knows I like the really tall, lengthy cornerback or receiver. Like, I fall in love with the Johnny Wilsons of the world, the 6'7" Florida State receiver. Is there like a type of prospect that I don't want to say fall for every time, but you just can't quit, even if sometimes it burns you? Like, for me, it's the giant corner receiver with the huge wingspan.
That is interesting. I think it doesn't play in this environment, but it is that big type of can do it all safety, like Derwin James. Like, you find a guy like that, I will fall in love with him every day of the week. But in this environment, I like finding guys in both the interior of the offense and the interior of the defense when it comes to guys who can win one-on-ones from a wide receiver perspective and from a defensive back perspective, because they move these guys inside and out, make safeties play cornerback, make cornerback play safeties. They want to stretch you to your fullest extent, and guys that can hold up and not shy away from these one-on-ones and not shy away from the bright lights, like that's where you find some absolute dogs. And that's why I love watching those one-on-ones when it comes to the defensive line and the offensive line and then wide receivers and cornerbacks, because you truly get to see who they are as competitors at the same time as well. Because you could come down there, oh, it's an all-star game, I'm just going to come down here, go through the motions. And then you got guys like Kyrie Jackson and Brendan Rice who are chirping each other like they just got done playing the Pac-12 game of Oregon and USC a couple months ago like they did. And I'm with you that if you get burned, stick to your guts, folks. If there's one thing from this weekend when it comes to scouting, if you're going to stand on the table, stand on the table. If you believe in somebody like J.J. Arcega-Whiteside I did a couple of years ago, don't waver until they give you a reason to waver.
One guy that I was hoping to come down here and believe in even more was Penn State corner Kalen King. But, if I had to give one loser of this week so far, it has been King. I just think he's been too aggressive, just really bites on the first move a lot. Like, he's undersized too at 5'11". I love his speed and I love how much he can mirror a receiver. But I will say, if there's one guy that didn't really come down here and make a lot of money, it would probably be King. And I'm sure we got a lot of Penn State listeners that are listening right now. And that's one guy that I definitely came down and was hoping to see more from.
I think his counterpart, though, and Theo Johnson is arguably the best tight end down there. I think tight end is going to be an intriguing position that there's going to be some options for this team in that draft, Lou, that, I mean, heck, Theo Johnson, is that an early day two pick or, middle of day 2 pick for you? Realistically, he could be. And this time of year, it's the ultimate hope seller. I love it. We could talk about this all day, every day.
Absolutely.
We're gonna, as we get into Mock Draft Monday coming up soon.
For sure. We got another show for you, though. Before that, on tomorrow's edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast, we thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. But that'll do it for this Thursday edition of the show. Thanks so much for tuning in. For Gino Camilleri, I'm Lou DiBiase signing off. As always, thank you for downloading. Thank you for watching and listening. And let's go, Birds.
Fly, Eagles, fly.